Good evening, I'm Jonathan Higgins,
I'm Rich Carlson.
and we're the Scanner Guys, and we made it through the time change. Some of you that had to do it.
Well, I don't change time here, but time changes on me. Since I
Yes.
work on East Coast time, even though my time doesn't change, my work hours change.
Yeah.
So now I got to get up an hour early.
Oh, yeah, that long commute's going to kill you.
Yeah. That almost 30 seconds from the bedroom to the office is just a killer commute.
Yes, it certainly is. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the show. We're talking about public safety radio jargon, which is going to be an interesting topic. And we're going to keep it under 90 minutes. So if you're familiar with the show, it's ran a little bit long. First hour is going to be the topic of discussion, and then we'll have a quick Q&A after the topic, which will be about 30 minutes. So we should be wrapped up about 9:30 Eastern Time. So let's dive right into this. We've got some things to share with you. A great webinar we're going to tell you about momentarily. So let's dive into the slideshow. So tonight it's going to be an overview on public safety radio jargon for 2021. And make sure you follow, like, and subscribe to all of our social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. Most important, you're watching us on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button right now. Hit that subscribe button right now, and definitely check out our website, thescannerguyshow.com.
I never know where that subscribe button is on the screen because it's always backwards.
Yes, I think it's on the other side of us.
Oh, it's over there. Okay.
Over there, yeah. Underneath the phone right now, if you're looking at this slide.
Okay.
Um,
Well, if I
yeah.
point the phone, it's over there.
Yeah, it's
But the button's over there.
yeah, it's over there. The phone's over there. So if you haven't already, sign up for the Scanner Guys newsletter. We periodically send out a newsletter, and you can do that at the website as well, thescannerguyshow.com. And we can't forget hats, t-shirts, and coffee mugs are also available on our website as well. So definitely pick up yourself a Scanner Guys hat, coffee mug, and t-shirt. You can do that on our website right now.
Don't hang your hat on your webcam.
Yes. Yeah, don't do that. So this is the cool thing that's coming up from over our friends over at the Scanner School. They're actually doing an SDR webinar, and that'll be Tuesday, March the 23rd at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. If you're interested in signing up, visit thescannerschool.com/webinar, and that'll allow you to save the seat. So you'll be able to join them for a live webinar. And also, he has some free courses coming up as well, and you can sign up for those at his website, courses.scannerschool.com. Software-defined radios, everything that you need to know, the tools that you need for setting up your radio. So it should be a good webinar with Phil over at the Scanner School.
At least we got his name right this time.
Yes, that's for sure.
I always get that messed up. So sorry, Phil.
So we're going to break this out into categories tonight. So we have three parts. It's basically fire departments, EMS and rescue, and then police departments. So kind of each group has their own little jargon that they have. So we're going to kind of dive into it one by one tonight. So let's start with those fire departments. Now, the common things that we're used to hearing a lot is for large cities is box alarms. This is something that we hear a lot, and this is basically pertaining to a particular location within the city, right, Rich?
Yeah, so the way it used to be done, and the reason they came up with that terminology, well, it depends on the area. There's two origins to the box alarm. The first one, and the most common one these days, is they had an area of the city, and that area had all the units that would respond to a certain type of call listed on a card, and you would, if you had an alarm at that area, you pull that card, and Engine 7, Truck 17, and Chief number 4 would all be the due units on that. And if those guys were busy, there were backups for them. But the box alarm before that originated because they had fire alarm pull boxes on the car.
Yeah, that's how I know them.
Yeah, so you would go to you didn't have telephone, so if your house was on fire, you'd run out and pull the pull box, and then they would send the fire department would go there and hopefully get there before your house burned down. And nowadays, with people have telephones and stuff like that, most areas those boxes are long gone. But that was a staple of city life, and even in the tiny little suburb that I worked at for 30 something years, we had several boxes around the village, and people could go there and pick up they actually had a phone in there. You could pick up a phone and call it in. But those were gone long before I started. They pulled the last of those out in the 50s. So that was the original term of box alarms, and then it kind of evolved into those cards. And then nowadays, of course, everything's done on computer.
Yeah, so a lot of people that collect memorabilia actually have some of those actual boxes.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of people collect that memorabilia, and they actually have it. Whether it's in their house. I've seen that. That a lot of people love to get these.
We got one. They found one in the village electrical department's warehouse.
Mm-hmm.
It was buried in the corner, and they found one. And so one of our guys from the police department grabbed it, and then we sent it out to have it refurbished. And it's sitting this day. It's sitting in the lobby of our police station.
That is super cool. I mean, a lot of the stuff, you think it's never going to go away. And then it just, eventually it goes away. And then a lot of it gets destroyed or, thrown out. I mean, to be able to have a piece of history such as that is pretty phenomenal.
Oh, yeah. I'd give my left leg for one of those things. But, of course, I'll never get one.
The other thing that we hear common, and a lot of times larger cities will have multiple fireground channels, especially with trunking systems now. The ability to be able to create additional channels or talk groups for a fire department is very easy at this point, where it was back in the day. Like you have a frequency listed here was a typical fireground channel. So this is, all the radios would be programmed with that particular channel. So if they had, of course, mutual aid, everybody would have that channel in the radio, and then they could switch to it. But nowadays, it's crazy now. I mean, each, with trunking systems, you could see like larger cities could have multiple firegrounds, and it could be assigned based on incident. Let's say there's a pretty large motor vehicle accident on the highway. You've got a structure fire. You could have multiple fireground channels working at one given time.
Yeah, and it used to be, again, kind of dating myself, back in the old days, 153.83 was the fireground channel. And that was the channel that everybody used. And, of course, it got kind of busy, especially in a metro area. And they had extra channels. Often it would be there were 3 VHF mutual aid channels, 154.265, 0.28, and 0.295. And if one or two of those channels weren't used as mutual aid in that area, they would often use those as firegrounds. And so they would have other VHF channels in the area for fireground, but especially in a suburban area where you're going to have many agencies going to a big fire, everybody would have to make sure they had those same frequencies. Now with these regional trunking systems, it's real easy to assign fireground channel talk groups, although technically, according to some of the regulatory agencies, you're supposed to use simplex for fireground operations instead of repeaters and trunking systems. Oftentimes, they still do use talk groups. So check your local listings and see what they use for fireground in your area, and put those in your radios, because when the stuff hits the fan in your area, those are the channels they're going to be talking about.
Yeah, if any of you are from Plymouth County, Massachusetts, I was able to sit down with one of the directors of communication there, and they've got a really cool setup where a lot of the cities and towns have one frequency licensed to them for their fire communication. Whenever they have a major incident, they'll go on Plymouth County Control and let them know that they have an incident taking place, and then they will get one of the they have a handful of fireground channels, and one of those channels will be assigned to them for the incident.
Right.
Now, the other great thing about that is if you have any mutual aid rolling in, they will announce that on the Plymouth County channel, saying, so and so fire respond to the incident command, fireground 7, and then to what channel to be on. And the great thing about Plymouth County, it's not a trunking system, it's a conventional system. But if you don't want to monitor all the fire departments in your county, the great thing is you monitor their main dispatch channel for fire dispatch for the county. You're able to hear all the incidents. And then if you hear something that's really good going on that you want to monitor and it's assigned to fireground, then you can pop into fireground. Or the other thing is, let's say Duxbury Fire has got an incident. They're using the fireground channel and their local channel. You could just pop in Duxbury Fire and listen to that as well. So, it's certainly, these channels, we'll do another show about these mutual aid channels, but these are great for listening to a huge area without listening to every single EMS call. It's just crazy.
And that's right. And a lot of and what they do out in our area is when the dispatcher dispatches the call, they assign them to an en route channel. So they have one dispatch channel, which all the dispatches are done on the entire area. And then they have an en route channel. And for 99% of the calls, that en route channel is also used for the fireground communications, if there are any. And if it turns out to be a bigger operation, then they can assign different fireground channels. And there may be multiple fireground channels at a big incident. You might have a staging channel, a interior channel, and an exterior attack channel, or an EMS fireground channel for the different things. So if you got a really big thing, you might have 4 or 5 different fireground channels. Sometimes those are predetermined that, okay, fireground for operations are on channel A, and interior is going to be on channel C, and EMS is always going to be on channel F. And sometimes they're just assigned ad hoc as they're needed from a pool of channels.
Well, that's a staggering number there. New York City being one of the largest cities probably in the country, with 16,000 physical fire alarm boxes.
So New York City is one of the areas that still maintain those fire alarm boxes. I know they're gone in Chicago and most of the other cities, but New York apparently is maintaining them.
That's crazy. And so you kind of hinted to the next thing. So big incidents a lot of times require an incident commander. Tell us a little bit more about that, Rich. What does that all mean when you hear that on the radio?
Well, there's it used to be kind of every town did it their own way type of thing, but now they've gone and very much standardized in an incident command. And there's a specific protocol that a lot of agencies are using now. And one of the protocols is that there is an overall incident commander, IC, for any of the any large incident, and that is the top of the pyramid. So you got a pyramid. You got the incident commander at the very top, and then you have everything else is below that, and you might have an EMS commander and an interior commander and a staging guy and stuff like that. But at the very top, you got your incident commander, and then you've got your other commanders for specific tasks. And then each of those guys have guys that report to them. Typically, the only person that would contact dispatch would be the incident commander or his designee. So all the other communications are on fireground channels, and they all go into their individual commanders on a large incident or to the incident commander on a smaller incident. And then the incident commander is normally the only person that would contact dispatch unless the unit is en route to or leaving from the scene. So
Gotcha.
when an engine four goes to a call, engine four will call dispatch, say, yeah, engine four, we're en route to 123 Main Street. Engine four has arrived at 123 Main Street. We are switching to Fireground Red or Fireground 7 or whatever fireground they're assigned to. And then all other communications between engine four and the rest of the world is done through incident command. And then they'll say, incident command from engine four, we're here, we're at staging, where do you want us? Or, whatever the situation is. And when engine four is released back to the rest of the world, they will be released by incident command. Then engine four will then contact the dispatch and say, engine four to dispatch, we're en route to quarters and available. So all the other communications between the time they get there and the time they leave the scene is done through incident command.
Yeah, it keeps it pretty nice because it's a little bit less on the dispatcher. It's more because you basically have it localized.
Yeah.
You have eyes on the ground that's able to see what's going on, and they're able to maneuver everything out. And it's certainly just a really great way. And that's what I've noticed over the last several years, that fire departments have gotten a little bit more structured with the way they're doing things, versus when I listened, when I started listening to a scanner, way back when, every town, like you said, Rich, was a little bit different. They weren't doing the exact same thing when it came to, EMS calls or fire calls or a huge event, whether it be a structure fire. It was, everybody was kind of doing something a little bit different. I noticed over the years, when I was living in Massachusetts, I noticed it became a little bit more structured. Sometimes the county came in on board to be able to make these additional channels available, or to put down a structure plan on how we're going to have mutual aid and so on.
Yeah, and it's the whole thing is called incident command system, and through the ICS, they've trained police officers, firefighters, EMS personnel to follow this standardized protocol. And I mean, I even went to a week-long class on that here in Phoenix, 20 years ago before I moved out here. And, it was really an eye opener, and to have everybody on the same page on how they operate, on how they do all this stuff is really a boon to the operation. You know what to expect. You know the proper terminology, and that's huge too, especially when you have people from different agencies. So yeah, my Mayberry, Mount Pilot, and in Chicago all responded to the same incident. They all speak the same language, and so they know what they know what they need. They know what they're talking about, and when they say this, they know what they're going to get. And with that protocol, sometimes it might seem a little weird to do it, but if you do that same thing every time, you get into that habit, you get that muscle memory, and it makes it real easy to remember next time how to do it, and that way you do it right.
And the other thing that comes to a thing that we hear a lot of times from major fires is overhauling. This is the last stage of fire suppression, this checking for hot spots, and that you'll hear a lot for big fire incidents. You'll hear them using that term over the radio.
Yeah.
So let's continue on to our next slide here. Other things that you would hear typically in the fire department. Many of you probably already know this one, MVA, motor vehicle accident. Mm-hmm. At some departments, it's known as a 1050, a crash, a 962. If you're from Massachusetts, a code 16 if you're listening to the Mass State Police. Mutual aid, we just talked about this a second ago, and this is the big thing, in mutual aid. It's whether it be resources on the scene or the other thing that they use mutual aid for, station coverage.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, or change of quarters is what they call it in the Midwest. So what they might do is, or move ups. in some agencies too. So again, there's many different terminologies for the same thing. So basically, what they would do is they would backfill the stations in the town that's hit. So let's say Mayberry's got this big fire, and now there's nobody in Mayberry Station. So if there's any other calls in Mayberry, there's nobody to cover it. So the pilot engine and then and a ladder from some other community would come in and go to the Mayberry Station and be there and available for calls within Mayberry, and they would go to those. They would handle their calls for their town while Mayberry is working on the big fire, and it might be, and you might be moving stuff up from really far away, and you might actually be filling in stations that are filling in somebody else's station. So it's kind of a daisy chain effect. And if you take a look at these box alarm cards that we talked about earlier, they often use these things for mutual aid situations. They'll have the due units to go to the scene, and then they'll have another column for move ups or station standby or whatever that particular agency calls it to backfill the station. So, or change of quarters. And oftentimes the change of quarters from level 3 respond on level 4. And then somebody else from goes in to fill in the station. And then if it goes to a level 5 box, then the change of quarters from box 4 or level 4 will go to the fire on box 5, and then somebody else will backfill. So it's kind of a move stuff up a chain. So you might go from being at your station, going to Mayberry Station, and then going to the scene.
All right. So the next item is MDCs. Quick description of that, Rich.
Okay, MDC is a mobile data computer or a mobile data terminal or the CAD system. It's basically the computer that is in your car and is used to, these days, it's used to do a lot of the communications with the dispatcher. So for the fire departments, instead of getting on the radio and saying we're en route and blah, 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 they would turn on their computer, and they have a button that says they're en route, and they have another button when they've arrived, and another button when they're available. And if you take a look at the call, it'll have the address, it'll have all the other information on the call that the dispatcher may not have put out on the radio. They could put stuff that's somewhat more private, like universal precautions or a door entry code or more esoteric notes for them to go. Third floor, take a left at the top of the corridor and the third door on the right type of thing. So and it could have maps. It could have all kinds of information about it, hydrant locations, like Joe said. It could have, with the maps, if they serve a large area, they may not know all the streets, so it'll give them routing instructions, all kinds of different stuff. For the police department, same thing, call details. It could be a Knox box instructions to unlock a lockbox with keys that have keys to the building. It could be past history information. If a person at the residence has got some sort of a medical or psychological or other issues that they should be aware of. Some areas have a program where if you have somebody who has who's deaf or blind or has some type of medical condition that may need additional services, you can put that in their computer, so that way when you respond to the house, you know that that person has some issues.
All right, and the new thing that we're hearing a lot is automated dispatching. The city of Charlotte is using this, and it's typically on their main dispatch channel, and it's a computer-generated voice, and it's just putting out the call. And with that automated dispatching, it's assigning an incident channel or a fire ground. So, they hear this automated coming over the radio, yep. and they know, okay, so we're going to operate on such and such channel for this incident. And then they'll be able to communicate to a live person on that particular channel, for the incident.
Yeah, and there's here in the Phoenix area and many other areas they are using this, and you get so used to hearing that voice that you know exactly that that's what's going on, and it's really weird to hear when that system goes down. And sometimes the dispatchers like to do that stuff themselves, and they'll take that down and do the voice themselves, and it just sounds weird not to have. And I forget her name. These voices have names to it. You can pick the different the voices that they use. Like here's a call coming out now.
Fire Channel A9. Unknown fire. 39th Avenue and Southern Avenue. Engine 58. Fire Channel.
So that's the voice of the local fire dispatch, and they go.
She sounds very familiar. She's related to the lady that's in Charlotte.
Yeah, it's the same lady. Yeah, and
It's the
that
same
voice
lady.
goes out, and you wonder, and you hear that, and you know, okay, that's a fire call going out.
Yeah.
So, and that's all tied in with the CAD system, with the computer-aided dispatch. So the dispatcher types the information into the CAD, puts out the location. The computer automatically looks at who's available and who's due on the call, and sends that information to them. They put this voice channel, voice announcement out on the radio, which is all standardized call types and in announcements, and puts that information out, and then and then it puts it out. And sometimes they use their code, sometimes they use plain English or a mixture of both.
Okay. So let's continue on. And then this is just an example of when they arrive on scene. Side A is usually the front of the building where the front door is facing the street, but it may be also facing in the parking area. This is where the apparatus first arrives. So you'll hear a lot of times, go to the B side of the building or the A side or C or D side of the building. And this is how they refer to this. This is a great example on this on your screen here of what that all looks like.
Yeah, and this is again standardized within an incident command system. So the A side is the front, or the where they are, where the command is at, and then C is always the opposite side, and then B is always to the left, and D is always to the right, and it's just again a standardized way of describing the building.
All right, we'll keep motoring along here. So now we're at fire and rescue. So let's dive into this. Actually, we have let me just post this question real quick. Do you happen to know this FC response, Rich?
Well, again, it's probably very localized to wherever this viewer is at. It could be a different set of letters. It could be FD response, or maybe first I don't know, first choice. It could be who knows. Look in the radio reference Wikipedia for your area and see if it's listed there. A lot of times those codes, those localized codes, might be listed there, and it could be the name of an ambulance company. It could be a local term for a specific type of equipment. There could be all kinds of descriptions for that.
That's for sure. And let's first ambulance service for commercial hospital in Cincinnati, Ohio, in 1865. Wow. That hospital is now known as the University of Cincinnati Medical Center. Imagine that.
Yep. Well, and that's obviously not the Cincinnati ambulance from 1865.
No, I was able to find this photo. It's the New York Fire Department. Look at that. It looks like a bus.
Yeah, it's exactly what it looks like. Which is the front and which is the back?
Well, I think the front is where the gentleman is with the door, and then I don't know how they get the patient in, but I thought it was a pretty interesting.
Yeah, and it's a huge vehicle. Boy, I'd love to have had an ambulance that big. Most ambulances were like this size.
Yeah, that's for sure. So here's the common things that we would hear on the EMS side. Hospital on diversion. They currently have the patient load that they're able to handle. So what they will do is they will announce on a regional channel that XYZ hospital is on diversion. So if there's any medicals, they will, the EMS companies or the local fire department will divert if they're handling their own EMS calls, they will
Right.
go to a different hospital. This is something that we're getting a lot, positive and negative screening. You're hearing over the radio, when they get dispatched to a call, and it's whether or not a patient has COVID-like symptoms. Rich, you were talking about this last week. This was when the AIDS epidemic was huge, and you would use this term then, right?
Yeah, they would. Back then, the term that we used was use universal precautions, and eventually people figured out, well, you're supposed to be doing that anyway. So if you're doing your job right, you reduce the possibility of exposure to any infectious disease, whether it be what was big back then, AIDS and such, or now with COVID or anything else or any other infectious disease. So if you're doing it right, then you shouldn't have a problem. When I was on the fire department, we oftentimes never even wore gloves, and that was, and we had
That's crazy.
Oh yeah, we had some pretty horrendous crashes and stuff like that. And we'd come back to the firehouse, and we would go into a shower with all of our clothes on to wipe the blood off. I mean, it was pretty gross, but that was the way it was, and it was before AIDS was known or we were aware of it. And so nowadays, you look at these guys and they're like, they've got gloves on, they've got masks, they've got all this protective gear. And back when we were doing ambulance calls, we never had that. Watch old Emergency, the TV show Emergency. Watch those. That was done in the 70s, and most of the time they weren't wearing gloves, and that was really the way it was done back then.
Yeah. Things have certainly changed a lot.
And they have lots of different terms for this, and a lot of agencies might have one. Dave said Protocol 36 is what they use in the Western New York area, and it could be all kinds of different different codes that they use locally for that. And if it's something new that's popped up over the last year or so, it's a good bet that it might be something for COVID.
Yeah, I mean, I hear it all the time. It's positive screening, negative screening,
Yeah.
and it just became. We're so deep in this epidemic that it just rolls right off the dispatcher's tongue at this point. It's just an additional information, for arriving, for those people arriving on scene to be able to take some additional precautions. The other thing that we hear, and it's usually referred to the type of unit that's going out, BLS and ALS. Rich, if you could give the audience just the basics of what this all means.
Okay, so basic life support is just that. It's basically stop the bleeding, make sure they're breathing. Advanced life support is much more advanced, and that's when you're going to be able to do things like put a heart monitor on, perhaps a defibrillate. Defibrillate. I can never say it. I've done it a million times. I can never say the darn thing. And actually start IVs and stuff like that. So basic life support is stop the bleeding, make sure they breathe, and ALS is everything beyond that.
And then CMED, which is the coordination of medical emergency direction. A lot of times this will be in Massachusetts. They had a group of CMED channels, and how this would work is they would call the hospital when they were a few minutes out, letting them know what they have coming in. 36-year-old patient with head laceration, the pulse and everything is this, that, and the other thing. So they're prepping the emergency room so they know what's coming in. And then a lot of times, sometimes a doctor will get on there and say, give them directions on additional things to do before they get there. And usually it would be, depending on how the county was set up. I know with Massachusetts, it was literally like 10, 15 minutes out from the hospital. And that was what is it? A simplex system, I believe, where you could only hear, like you could only hear the ambulance when you were close relationship to it. You could hear the hospital a little bit further out.
Yeah, there were in the Midwest, at least, and many other parts of the country. They have VHF channels that 155.34, 155.400, 155.28, etc. And those were we called them the med channels. It was just Mercy channels, medical emergency radio communications for Illinois, and what they called them in Illinois. And they used the same channels in other states with different names. And those were in almost every ambulance. And that was before the UHF med channels came up, the 463 meg channels. And most areas using when they switched over to the 463 meg UHF channels, they used them in 2-frequency simplex. So the ambulance would talk out on 468 and the hospital would talk out on 463. In some areas, they would put up repeaters for those, but that was relatively unusual. So, but nowadays, 99% of that stuff is done on cell phones.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy how a lot of it's changed. It's very regional with that. All right, so now we're going to get into the fire department segment of the show. In case you're just joining us, we're talking about public safety radio jargon. This show will be available, of course, after the broadcast. In case you missed the beginning half of it, you can watch it once it's over. We are currently live right now, so you're not able to rewind us. That would be kind of interesting to do that. Yeah. These are the things that probably a lot of us are like, I've heard these on TV shows and hear it a lot on the scanner. I mean, a bolo, be on the lookout for.
And we would call that ATLs, attempt to locate. And it's all very localized.
Gone on arrival, GOA, B&E. And we already covered this one, an MVA, a motor vehicle accident, DUI, which we hear quite a bit and probably will hear tonight.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's St. Patrick's Day. There'll be a lot of drunks out there. We call it amateur night. So, yeah, and sometimes some places call it DWI or and there's other terminology, depending on what your local statutes call it, is the abbreviation. So, police and firefighters, they love to use abbreviations. So whatever your local statute calls it, they abbreviate it to the letters.
And then let's go to the next slide here. Let's see here. Tell us a little bit more about this. I mean, this is what we hear a lot lately when there's a lot of stuff going on in the scene and there's other agencies trying to get in there and help.
Oh, yeah. So it used to be that the fire department would just run right in on a lot of calls, and it got to be very difficult and dangerous for the fire department to do that since they aren't equipped or trained to handle a lot of stuff that the police are. So a lot of days, a lot of places now, when they have an EMS or a fire call, but there might be some sort of a criminal or behavioral issue involved, the police department will go in first, and then they will secure the scene, as it says, or the situation is secure. And then that way the fire department knows it's safe for them to go into, and they're not going to get involved with gunplay or what other types of things that they're just not equipped or trained to handle. Other areas use that scene is secure or situation secure, which means that hey, I'm here, the bad guy's in custody, or there's no reason to bust your behind to get here. You can slow down. You still keep on coming, but you don't have to. You can kill the lights, kill the siren, and just drive relatively normally. So there's two different setups for that.
All right, and K9, police tracking drugs, police tracking dog for drugs, and so on. They're specially trained canines. We would love to have a canine and a canine officer on the show. I know when Live PD was on, a lot of people loved following them because those dogs are so talented, so well trained, and and various dogs are used for multiple things in the job, whether it be searching for drugs or searching for a suspect. I mean, they're pretty amazing. Some of them are trained bomb sniffing dogs. From what I understand, they have all types of different things that they're assigned to. They're basically a part of the police department.
Yeah. And they are considered officers in every sense of the word. And they get retirement ceremonies if they die in the line of duty, or even if they die out of the line of duty, they get full honors just like a human officer would. We never had a canine officer on my department, but we did have neighboring departments with canines, and they were extremely useful. So if we have time later, I'll tell you one of the funniest stories I ever had on the police department involving a canine.
That's for sure. I mean, they're just phenomenal. I can just, I was fascinated with watching them work on Live PD.
Yeah. I'll take 30 seconds and tell this story. It is extremely hilarious. So we were at a burglary call at a house. So I'm at the front door. There's another officer at the back. There's guys on the corners. They call the canine officer. The canine officer comes in. They take the dog in. They go around the house, the first floor. They're going to go up on the second floor, and there's an open circular stairway to go from the first floor to the second floor. And the officer's got the dog on the leash, and it's bring him to the stairs, and the dog sits down and won't go up the stairs. The dog is apparently terrified of these open stairs and will not go up the stairs. So you got this 130-pound German Shepherd, and he's dragging. That dog just won't go up the stairs. So the handler has to carry the dog up the stairs. And I'm sitting there busting a gut laughing because I'm the only guy who could see this at the front door. And, of course, everybody knew about it within 20 minutes. That story got out. But to see a 130-pound German Shepherd, who is the nastiest dog you ever met, afraid to go up the stairs and had to be carried by the handler up the stairs, it was just I had to actually get somebody to replace me because I was laughing so hard.
Yeah, I mean that's got to be crazy. I guess because it was open, and probably that fear of just oh my word.
I can understand it, but it's just to see it and knowing that dog. Everybody was afraid of the dog because it was trained not only for search but also for protecting its partner. And I've seen that dog biting and jumping on people like that to put them down. And to see that, it was absolutely hilarious. It's the kind of thing you would see on Reno 911. No, the dog did not walk back down. He had to be carried down the stairs.
But I'm sure once he got beyond those stairs, he was back to work.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But this is something you would see with Lieutenant Dangle carrying, and if that show had been on at the time, it would have been a perfect for that show.
Wow, that's a good one, Rich. The beat. So this is a term that we hear. Rich, tell us a little bit more about that.
Okay, so typically when you're assigned to a beat as a police officer, you have a specific area of your community that you're responsible for. So if there's any calls that come in your area, you are assigned to that, and your patrol area is that area. So it might be everything north of Elm Street and east of the railroad tracks is your beat. And any calls that come in from there, you're assigned to, and your routine patrol is going to be within that beat. And you might be assigned, to watch out for specific things within your beat. And it used to be indicated for foot beats. So you would go out on foot, and you would have this 4-block area that you would walk on foot. But nowadays, obviously, everything is done by vehicle, so these beats are much larger.
And then we hear this way too many times, domestics. And this is typically when it's family members or partners where they get into a heated sometimes fight, or it can get physical at times,
Yep.
and we'll hear that quite a bit on the scanner. So that's something
Yeah.
that police, and this is one of those cases where if somebody is hurt, where the police officers come in and try to get the situation under control, so EMS can come in there and try to help those that are hurt. And these are very dangerous situations. As we mentioned with securing the scene, that's probably one of the things that happens during these domestics. Is just EMS doesn't know what they're walking into, and everybody's just got to be careful. I mean, people have their tempers are up, and it's not a good scene whatsoever. Now, a lot of you are probably familiar with these, and some of you probably use this in conversation. A lot of people know 10-4.
Mm-hmm.
And 10-20. Those are typical. People just know it right off to their head, because they used it before, whether they've done some communication on a two-way radio, or some people even use it in text. What's your 10-20?
Yeah, and you hear that. People do that on the phone and stuff like that. What's your 20, or 10-4, or what have you? And what's your 20 is very common to hear, even on the phone or in a text. And now you get a lot of agencies might use all kinds of codes. The joke was in the Chicago area, because Indiana agencies used a lot of codes, that Indiana actually had a 10 code to tell people to use more 10 codes. And other agencies like Chicago PD, they use 3 10 codes. 10-1 means there's an officer in need of assistance. Again, it's totally different because that's Chicago. 10-4 it's 10-4 with a 2-man unit, and 1099 is okay or acknowledgement with a 1-man unit, or the other way around. I can never remember which. It's been years, but those were the only 10 codes that Chicago used. In the suburbs, they use all kinds of codes, and of course, every town is a little different. So this list is only the kind of generalized list. Your town is, and most likely is, going to be different. So check locally on the Radio Reference Wiki, local websites, for the codes that are used in your area. These are the standard codes. Whether or not they're actually used this way in your area is anybody's guess at this point.
Yeah, so the great thing, I just saw somebody ask us to post these.
Yeah.
These are easy to find. On Radio Reference, on the wiki section, you may actually find some local code lists or signal lists for your local area. And this is just your regular standard, code 10 list that you can find pretty much anywhere online. But you may find on the wiki page, you may find a more detailed code 10 list.
Mm-hmm.
So more police codes. Code 4, okay, scene secure. Signal 8, meet up with me. Burglary is a 459, which is LA police code. And we hear tow trucks referred to so many different things. Wrecker, hook, tow, hit and skip, hit and run. When a crash is involved and one of the parties leave before police get on scene. There's a wide variety of regional and local codes and terminologies. And like you said, Rich, with the larger cities, and oftentimes they have their own particular way of conveying information over the radio.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times the suburban areas will emulate the large cities. So you get in the Chicago area, and a lot of the stuff that Chicago does is copied by or used by some of their suburbs. In the more rural areas, they will often do what the state police do. A lot of it has to do with who they operate with, or they cooperate with most, or who their friend agencies are. In our area, we did a lot of the stuff the same way the state police did, because we worked with them quite a bit. but other towns worked more with the big cities, so they did things the city way instead of the state way. LA and New York City have a huge effect on their regional area on how things do. The LA, the LA thing or method of doing things is huge in the Phoenix area. We call this LA East because everybody from California is escaping to Phoenix, and they bring a lot of that terminology with them. So a lot of the codes and procedures they use in LA make their way over here to Phoenix.
Very interesting there. So let's continue on.
And then they got the signals. Dale asked about signals. Signal 8 is very big in the Midwest. It's kind of, meet with me. But Indiana has a whole list of signal codes, and I had a list of them someplace, but I can't find them now. And other states might have their own lists as well. It'll say, signal 17, signal 14. And I think Indiana even had one signal that would remind somebody to use the call sign.
It's pretty amazing, the signal for a signal. And we've kind of mentioned this quite a bit during the broadcast. Jargon is very local. Mm-hmm. You may hear, one part of the country, certain things referred to one thing, and then being another to another. I would take, for instance, a police car, a cruiser, squad car, just the vehicle in general is being referred to something different.
Yeah, absolutely. So in Chicago, it's all right, squad, send me the call. And squad means the dispatcher, because it used to be the squad room, and the squad room was where all the calls are dispatched. So now the dispatcher is just called squad. You get down here in Phoenix, and everything is regimented. They do things in a specific way, and it's very professional sounding. Chicago sounds anything but professional, but they get the job done, and they get the job done pretty efficiently. It's just that it doesn't sound as professional because they have their way of doing stuff, and it's not robotic. It's kind of unique. So, and there was a comment that came up at 48 After from Joe, and I think it's very important, and that's why I bring it up to you now. The interop or the ICS system, they discourage 10 codes in favor of plain English. That's very important. A lot of agencies are getting away from codes and going to more plain English as interoperability becomes more important in operations. And so a lot of the jargon they are trying to get rid of the jargon and go back to plain English so that Mayberry can understand Hooterville, that can understand Mount Pilot.
That's for sure.
And we had a complaint that we weren't mentioning Hooterville. We're too busy talking about Mayberry, so I had to make sure we got Hooterville in there too.
Does it have a Hooters restaurant there?
I hope so. They got good ribs.
I haven't ate there. My wife and daughter ate there on one of the trips going back up to Vermont. Mm-hmm. I haven't. I've heard that the good things about the ribs. So
yeah, the food is actually pretty good, and the scenery obviously is the main attraction. But the food's good.
All right, keep it local. And event and clearance codes. Rich, what is this all about? What does this mean for our scanner listeners?
So some agencies will use event codes to dispatch a call. So like in Phoenix, a 962 is a traffic crash. In Hooterville, a traffic crash might be a 5410 or something like that. And on criminal calls, a lot of the agencies will use some variation of the UCR or Uniform Crime Reporting codes as their event codes or their origination codes. So you are dispatched to a 0310, which is an armed robbery, or 110 or 0110, which is a homicide. And that's the call you're dispatched to. And then when you get there, and you realize that it wasn't an armed robbery, but it was actually a homicide. So you change, change it from a 0310 to a 0110. So they'll use those to dispatch the call sometimes. in the CAD system, everything is using these UCR codes. And whether or not they use those codes on the radio or not is up to the local agency. But it's a good way of doing it because there's less. If they're using the standardized definitions, it makes things much more clear. The UCR codes are used to provide a consistent definition of a criminal event nationwide. So when they have a burglary in Los Angeles, it's described the same as a burglary in Chicago, New York, or Hooterville, or Mayberry. So it's a burglary is a burglary is a burglary. Instead of it's a burglary or it's a theft or it's a robbery, it's a burglary is this, a theft is that, and a robbery is this over here. And they are very specifically defined. And then that way, when they look at the crime stats, they're comparable and they mean something because you are defining everything the same. If everybody's defining the event differently, it doesn't make any sense to bother looking at the numbers. Clearance codes are used at the end of a call where the officer will say, okay, dispatch, that's a 19 Paul or a 3F on that call. And if there's no report involved, they'll use a clearance call to give the dispatcher a quick reference to what they did and how they handled it. So like, and I don't remember the codes, like a 7 franc might be, it was a disturbance call and F might mean situation handled, everybody went home or whatever the situation is. And that way the dispatcher can put that information in the call and they'll have a standardized understanding of what was done with the call and they're done with it. If there's no clearance call, that means there's a report written.
Okay, perfect. Let's continue on here. So, out of your years of policing, have you ever done the pit maneuver?
No.
Okay.
I've had traffic crashes and chases, but I've never done a pit maneuver. They didn't start teaching the pit maneuver until after I got promoted off the street. So.
Okay, so you didn't get to pit anybody.
No.
Fairfax County Police Department actually came up with a pit maneuver. Basically, this is a way to get up alongside of a vehicle that's taking off in their pursuit of, basically tapping their corner and then making them kind of spin out. Mm-hmm. And this has to be done safely. Shortly after I moved down here, I was living in the camper, listening to the scanner one night, and it was a state trooper in pursuit, and he requested permission to use the pit maneuver, and then they granted it to him, and then he did the pit maneuver, and of course he got the suspect, and that was the end of it. You kind of it's the best way to kind of end a high speed chase that's that could be going into a largely populated area, just putting an end to it. And if it's done correctly, they're able to spin out that car and get those suspects. Yeah,
and pursuits are one of the most dangerous thing a police officer can do without a gun. And people get killed on pursuits. And typically it's not the bad guy that gets killed. It's innocent people that get killed. So a lot of agencies just don't do pursuits. But sometimes you got to chase them, or some agencies do have a chase policy, so where they will complete a chase until it's over. And a pit maneuver is a way to more safely stop the pursuit. We're not too concerned with the safety of the bad guy. We're concerned with the safety of the innocent people that are driving on those roads. So you find a clear area where you can pit the person and put them off. Basically what you're doing is you're wrecking them out. And NASCAR does this all the time. This is common.
Not on purpose. A lot of times what'll happen is you get in that pocket of air, mm-hmm. and you've spun someone out by accident. They keep changing the other thing, Dale, which we had on a couple of weeks ago. They keep changing the body structure and the downforce of these vehicles. Yep. You can get into, without even touching them, you could spin them. If you get right in that spot in that pocket of air, poof, makes them spin up. But yes, Rich, on purpose, it's done on there as well.
Oh yeah, it's never on purpose. Yeah, but
I mean, they may say, no, I didn't mean to do that.
Caught in their pocket. So yeah. So like I said, pit maneuver is a relatively safe way to end a pursuit. You have to have a specific. First off, you have to be trained for it. Secondly, most agencies require supervisory permission to do a pit maneuver because basically what you're doing is you're crashing your car intentionally, okay, and you're crashing the bad guy. And third, you have to have a good location to do it. You need to have a fairly straight, clear area free of other vehicles. So it's basically done on timing, location, permission, and training. So you need all of that in order to do a pit maneuver.
All right, so now we've got the alphabet, which everybody's familiar with this. I mean, some people actually learned it when they're trying to spell their name over the phone when somebody keeps spelling their name wrong. Yep. It's J, J Juliet, O Ocean, so on and so forth.
Yep.
And this is
Robert Charles Henry.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there are two types of phonetic alphabets. There's the police style, which is the Adam Boy, Charlie, David, Edward stuff, and then there's the military or ham or the different names for it. There's a international or NATO, I think is what they call it these days, which is the Alpha Bravo Charlie. In some areas, some agencies will use one or the other. Some guys police officers that were military might use the military phonetics until they get yelled at or teased enough to go to the more standardized police phonetics. We had that problem where I worked. We had guys that come in out of the military and they'd be spelling stuff Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, and the dispatcher would tell them, "Can you spell that again using the proper phonetics?" And then they'd have to pull down the card and say, okay, Adam, Boy, Charlie. I think Charlie and X-ray are the only ones that are the same between the two different codes.
It looks like it. Just looking at this list right now, it looks like those are the only two that are the same. We're a minute over, but we're continuing on. So next week's topic of discussion is using an analog scanner in the digital world. We've talked about this before. We're going to give you tips and suggestions and why you should clear off the dust on some of your analog scanners, or why should you consider an analog scanner. If you're watching us on your Roku or Apple TV, that's awesome. If you didn't realize it, you can download on Roku or Apple TV the YouTube app, and you can watch us on the big screen and watch us there. And of course, you can watch us on your smartphone, your tablet, your computer, wherever it's convenient for you. Next week's show, Wednesday, March the 24th, 2021, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific. I may be solo in the beginning of the show. Rich has got an appointment that he wasn't able to get out of, so don't be alarmed if you don't see Rich right at the beginning of the show. He will pop in. He will pop in. So, and we'll get that all situated. So we're going to talk about analog scanners in a digital world. So it should be a really good show. And we're going to give you some tips and suggestions. You may actually take the dust off of that 780 and start using it again. So that's going to be a good program to watch. You're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Make sure you do it now. We appreciate it there. And
don't forget the ding-a-ling button to get notified.
Yes, that's for sure. T-shirts, hats, and coffee mugs are available through our website, scannerguyshow.com. So make sure you purchase that through our website. And we want to make sure that we mention our retail partner, which is Scanner Master since 1978, the nation's oldest and most experienced scanner dealer of all brands of police scanners, software, accessories, and programming. Shop them online or call the scanner experts at 1-800-722-6637, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Online at scannermaster.com. And if we don't get to your questions this evening, make sure you drop them an email at support@scannermaster.com. Make sure you follow, like, and subscribe to their social media, which is Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube as well at Scannermaster Co. And that was our overview on public safety radio jargon for 2021. We're going to jump into your questions right now. If you're just joining us, we're going to go on a quick Q&A. It'll be about 30 minutes, and then we'll wrap up the show for the evening. So thank you so much to everybody that's sticking around for the second half of the show. We'll make this quick and easy.
Alrighty, so we got a bunch of people that ordered their coffee mugs or their T-shirts or their hats, and they got them. Fantastic. So Mike, Kevin, and Hawkeye, fantastic. One of our Mike got the wrong coffee mug, but they're sending him the right one. So good deal, and especially if they let you keep the wrong one.
Yeah. That's for sure. If they allow you to keep the wrong one, that's pretty good.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Sometimes Amazon or some of these other places will do that where they send you the wrong thing. If it's their mistake, instead of it'd be cheaper for them to let you keep it and send you the right one than it is to send the mailing label to get the other one back. So there was Portland, Maine. Apparently, that's a small city, but they still maintain their box system, according to Charles.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these cities, like New York City and Portland, and I'm sure there's a whole bunch of other ones that still maintain it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's cool. If they're still maintaining them, they still work. Hey, more power to them. Kevin asked about fireground channels. Is this more of a close distance listening on conventional analog channels? We talked about that a little bit. So most areas use conventional simplex channels for fireground operations, and that's what you're supposed to do with all the agencies, the best practices and such. So if you're hearing a fireground channel, it should be on those low power, mobile, portable only channels. Some will do them on the repeaters. We're not really supposed to, but oftentimes if you're hearing the fireground channels, it means that it's your house on fire or maybe your neighbor. The question came up, what's interop all about? We've done entire shows on interop, and basically interop is a way for this agency to talk to that agency. So it could be the police department talking to the fire department. It could be Mayberry talking to Hooterville. It could be Chicago talking to Evanston, that type of stuff.
Yeah, we may actually revisit that topic again.
Yeah. Mobile, in Joe's area, they have what they call mobile emergency response vehicles. There could be different definitions for different types of response vehicles. So a MERV, you could have EMS, an EMS vehicle. You can have an ambulance. You can have an MICU, which is a mobile intensive care unit. There'd be all kinds of different terminology for basically an ambulance. Mike wrote at one resource available before COVID-19 were the police public safety academy programs, police citizens police academy and citizen fire academies. Those were awesome. And hopefully once this COVID thing is passed, they'll do that again. And that's a great way to see what your local police or fire departments are doing, is to go to one of their citizen police academies or citizen fire academies. I know a couple retired police officers that have gone to them and really learned what their local agency does differently than what when they work for. We have one here where I live, but unfortunately, obviously, with everything going on now, it's not open. But once things calm down, I plan on going to that to see what my local agency does.
Okay.
We were talking before about FC. What FC means, and fire company is a good bet for that. So whoever it was that was asking about the FC, I don't remember who that was, but that's a good one to check. Question came up, is the Whistler 1065 phase 1 or phase 2? It is phase a phase 1 only scanner, so it does not do phase 2. If you want phase 2, you need to get a TRX or a P2 or an HP or a Home Patrol 2.
Yeah, definitely. If you have questions about the about the radios and what they're able to do, give a call. I mean, that's the best way to call the 1-800 number Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern time. You'll be able to get some information, and I'm sure you're going to have some follow-up questions. And we're going to have questions for you as well. What are you looking for? Are you looking for a handheld or a base unit? And then we're going to point you in the right direction there. What are you looking to listen to? Then we're going to look at that as well. Definitely for that particular question, definitely give us a call, because we're able to give you a lot of information, regarding, and we can get you in the right direction of a scanner that's going to suit your needs.
Yeah, and you might not need the latest, fanciest, greatest scanner. You might be able to use an analog scanner or a phase one only scanner in your area. So, and the thing to remember too is, and this question comes up all the time, is a digital scanner will also work on analog channels. So, and a phase two scanner will also work on phase one. So the better scanners always work on the lower stuff, but the more basic scanners won't work on the higher stuff. Fredingham wrote, our signal code's standardized. And that was probably before we spoke of it, but no, they are not standardized in any sense of the word. Everything, all jargon, all codes are local. There are some nationwide codes that are used here and there, but they aren't used everywhere. And sometimes, your area is going to have their own type of code. So look locally for your local codes. Dave is putting up a D130. If you use a section of PVC between the mount and the antenna to get more height, will that affect grounding or reception? I would not use PVC as a mount for a base station antenna, especially one as big as a D130. Use metal. You can go to Home Depot or go to the Scanner Master website and get standard mast pieces. They come in 5-foot and 10-foot lengths, and you can stack them on top of each other as long as you don't go too high where it starts flopping. But use that because that's part of your grounding situation. So you're much better off using a metal mast versus a plastic pipe. Billy wrote that his areas, they'll say 97 in reference to a mental health subject. Any day where that comes from? Well, 1096 was the 10 code, or is the 10 code in a lot of areas for a mental health issue. So it might be a take on that, or it could be some other code that they used at some point, or maybe they just picked a number out of the hat to use it. Sometimes they'll do that. This is a great discussion. At 57 after the hour, Joe wrote about defining a tanker. So, and it's not necessarily an east or west coast thing. By ICS standards, a tanker is an aircraft that has water or chemicals to be dropped on a fire. A tender is got wheels and is basically a tank on wheels. So by ICS standards, a tanker flies and a tender rolls. So if they are, but the problem is a lot of fire departments would call tankers, which would be basically a milk truck filled with water, and they would use to bring water to places where they have none. But now by ICS definitions, that should be called a tender. But a lot of places have not changed to the proper vernacular, and they're still using their terminology that they've always used. So it's ICS says a tanker has wings and a tender has wheels. Let's see here. Can you use encrypted radios in combination with regular radios?
Yes. So yeah, you can. Encryption is based on a particular channel. So your radio can be either a couple of different ways programmed. So one particular channel has encryption, the other channel is in the clear. The other thing that it could be set up with the radio system is you could have a button on the radio, which then in turn encrypts your communication on that particular channel. But yes, two-way radio can be mixed with encrypted channels and channels that are in the clear. It's kind of like digital scanners. Digital scanners can hear both analog and digital, but they can't hear encryption.
Right.
Just want to be certain with that. You cannot hear encryption.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had radios that had the ability to go encrypted, and again, you just turn that on. And if one radio was not turned, that didn't have this encryption turned on, that guy would be in the clear, and the guys that were encrypted would be. So,
Yeah.
With fireground channels on conventional analog, would you have to be closer to the situation to hear it? Normally, yes.
But it depends. It just depends. If it's on a trunking system, you can be anywhere within that site. But yeah, if it's a non-repeaterized system, you have to be close to the scene.
Yeah, absolutely. Braden got his Spectrum Force antenna. He loves it, but it's he wants to see if there's any way to make it more stiff in the wind. So I'm assuming he's got the mag mount with the mini mag mount Spectrum Force antenna. Those antennas were designed to be real thin, and they will bend a little bit in the wind because there's a little spring part on the bottom. So that's normally not an issue unless you're going 80 or 90 miles an hour. If that's the case, you're probably going to want to move up to something like the Comtoco or some other more stiffer, larger antenna with a larger element. I mean, you really can't put a metal rod or anything like that in the antenna to make it stiffer because that defeats the purpose. I suppose you could probably put some heat shrink on it or something like that to give it a little more rigidity, but I don't know if you want to go through all that. For $45, you can get a Comtoco and then put it on an NMO mount, and you'll have a nice stiff one at 90 miles an hour. The thing's barely bending over.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I'm using the Spectrum Force wideband antenna. Works fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's see here. Chris Parrish wrote at 606, South Florida agencies often use Q codes, QSL. Yeah, they do that in Miami and some of the southern Florida areas. I've heard that while I've been down there. And those are the same codes that you would normally hear on ham radio. And I always thought that was kind of amusing to hear that. It was the only place I've ever heard them using Q codes. And I'm guessing that some guy who was writing the procedures 50 years ago was a ham operator or like Q codes, and he wrote those into the procedures, and they just kept on using them. Once you get into using a set of codes, it's very difficult to get an agency to change.
Yes, it's old habits die hard.
Yeah, and police and fire departments are very traditional. That's why they have red and green lights on the by the doors of a firehouse. They don't have any meaning these days, but it's tradition. And if anybody can explain the red and green lights, please let us know in the comments. And let's see here. Oh, I had the same question in there twice. Oh, that's not good. I almost repeated myself and said it over again. So, yeah, and the reason for simplex, we were talking about simplex fire channels, fireground channels. And the reason why they're supposed to be simplex instead of going through a repeater system is that you're not going to get the building penetration with a repeater that you would get with your conventional simplex channels. And also, there's no reason to broadcast a fireground operation to the entire area. Typically, it's just the guy in the building talking to the guy outside. And it's a much more reliable communication when you're talking radio to radio without having to go through infrastructure, which might be far away. So, yeah, and it's much more reliable to have that simplex communication, especially since everybody is within a couple hundred yards of each other. 10-200 and 10-100 are often used for personal relief in different types of formats. So if you are going to be 10-100, you're going to be standing up in front of a urinal for a couple minutes.
Well, depending on
the agency, and if
well, also depending on
the tied up a little longer and have to rearrange your uniform when you're done.
Well, I mean, not all officers can stand in front of a urinal.
Well, that's true. Well, they can. It just gets messy.
Oh man. Oh boy, we're just gonna continue going on. All right, what's your next one?
Okay. Let's see here. Let me go back here. So apparently, Les is telling us that the Pro Voice system in the Toronto area is no longer. The last Pro Voice system in the Greater Toronto area is no longer being used. So that used to be the Mississauga Hydro, which is what they call the electric utilities in Canada. So apparently they've gone Moto Turbo. So if you're in the Toronto area, there's no reason to buy the Pro Voice update. Back to the Wet and Wild. Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah. One's a 10100. The Wet and Wild. The Wet is 10100, and the Wild is 10200. Is that what it is? Yeah. So no, actually, the green light, red light was port and starboard, and I can never remember which is which, and it had to do with the marine type of stuff. So, and back in the 1950s, the agency that I worked in, I started there in the 70s, but in the 1950s, before they had two-way radios, in portable radios anyway, they would have a red light on the top of City Hall, and there were a couple other buildings in town where they would have a red light. And if the dispatcher had an emergency call that couldn't wait for the officer's next call in, they would turn on that light, and hopefully the officer would notice that the red light is on City Hall, and he would pick up the phone on the corner and call the dispatcher to find out what's going on. And they had radios in the cars by then, but they didn't have portable radios. So that would be, if you were out of the car, you would have to look for, keep an eye on that light. So, red is on the left and green is on the right. And again, one of those is port and one is starboard. And again, why they have them on firehouses, I don't know. I spent years on the fire department. We had them in our firehouse, and nobody there could tell me definitively why they were there. So if somebody knows, I want to know. So there are a lot of people are indicating their local codes and stuff. So right is starboard, so that means left is port. But again, why are they on firehouses? So the Mikey Mike wants to know what the best scanner is for law enforcement.
Depends on your situation, essentially, what you're looking for. I mean, are you looking for a handheld? Are you looking for a base unit? Do you have simulcast? Do you not have simulcast? I mean, it really depends on what you're looking to monitor. And each scanner, even in the Uniden product line, each scanner has its place.
Yeah.
And it's just, that, and also finding out your personal preferences. That's why a lot of times, if you're totally unsure of what direction to go on, give a telephone call. And then what we can do is we narrow it down. We figure out, what you're looking for, and then we find you the proper scanner that's going to be the best for you. Yep. What may be best for you may not be the best scanner for your friend.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it varies from person to person, depending on your listening habits and so on. I mean, I found that, over the decade of working at Scanner Master, what may be a good scanner for one person may not be the best for the other person. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and when you call and when you want to find out, we will look to see what they're using in your area and give you suggestions. And now you can always go top of the line and get an SDS 100 or 200. If you look for a handheld, you get the SDS 100. But you may not need to spend that kind of money on that fancy of a scanner when a 125 will work just fine in your area. So.
And nothing will work on Pro Voice. I noticed he posted that comment.
Encryption. We do have Pro Voice.
Well, yeah, Pro Voice. That's right. Yeah, it will work on Pro Voice, but not on Pro Voice encryption. Sorry.
Right. Yeah. And any encryption, none of our scanners work.
Just had a brain fart there. The MBTA system is.
Well, we get people calling all the time. They say, "Oh, the Pro Voice option will allow me to hear encryption," right?
No.
That is a very common question we get. They just want to. I just want to be sure the Pro Voice lets me hear encryption. No, it doesn't. So
Yeah, it's open sky. I saw that. I'm reading. See, the thing, I'm reading comments and answering that and thinking open sky. A lot of people were talking about open sky. Open sky will not work on any scanner. Pro
right.
Voice, NXDN, and DMR will work, but you have to look at this particular scanner. It may be an upgrade,
Yeah.
especially on the Uniden side. DMR, Pro Voice, and NXDN are paid upgrades. The reasoning behind that is Uniden has to cover their bases to pay for the licensing of that technology. I mean, the technology to be able to have those scanners decode is not cheap. It does
Yeah.
cost some money.
And it costs them on a per scanner basis. So that's why you have to pay on a per scanner for that particular type of format. And that's another question: is why is it free on the TRXs for NXDN and DMR, but you have to pay for it on the Uniden? And that's basically due to the licensing. Uniden licenses not only the mode, but also the trunking capabilities. And they handle trunking differently and better on the Uniden scanners than the TRX does. The TRX licensed the mode, which is much less expensive to buy than the license to use the trunking technology, and they use kind of a backwards way of trunk tracking on a small NXDN or a small DMR system. That's normally going to work just fine, but if on a busier system, the Uniden scanners will scan those DMR and NXDN systems much better because they've actually paid for the licensing for that technology.
Yeah, I totally agree with Bearcat Joe. When I have
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people asking about open sky,
Yeah.
it's not, there's not that many open sky systems. And the other thing that a lot of public safety have gone to open sky, they wish they didn't. It's
Yeah.
just because of the way the system operates, and it is like Joe mentioned, Bearcat Joe there. It is a shrinking market too. I mean, there's less and less people. People are moving away from the system.
Well, and they're not selling it anymore. So if they're not Open Sky now, they will not be Open Sky in the future. So there's really only a couple successful Open Sky implementations. Yeah,
Broken sky.
yeah. There's an instance, and there's a suburban Detroit has got Open Sky. There's a couple agencies in suburban Chicago and Milwaukee, and those were the agencies that have been the most successful with Open Sky. It seems to work pretty well for them, but they're no longer able to do any major upgrades to it, and they are already working on moving off to P25 systems, either the local regional systems or their own systems, to get away from it because it's no longer supported. And the same thing with Pro Voice. If they're Pro Voice now, they won't be. If they're not Pro Voice now, they will never be in the future.
Yeah, Joe. I think I think you're right. There's only like 3 or 4 of them left, open sky wise.
There's a few more, but I mean
The
Aurora
popular
system, in suburban Chicago, the city of Milwaukee, Oakland County, and all of them except for Milwaukee have already announced plans to move to P25. There's a couple down in Texas, which again are being converted to P25 systems, and everything out east is either going or gone from there. So there's not a whole lot. There's half a dozen or so major ones and a few smaller ones around the country. But again, if they're not there now, they aren't going to be there in the future. So and apparently the officers in the the Aurora Naperville system in suburban Chicago hate it. I've listened to it. I've actually used one of the radios once, and it's very difficult to understand. Much harder to understand than P25, and that's on a real one of their radios.
That's not a good thing if you're having a difficult time trying to understand on their actual radio. I mean, that's what they're hearing, and it.
Yeah. Well, P25, the same thing. When our agency got our first P25 radios, they sounded a lot different. Not worse or not better, just different than what they were used to. And with the P25, there's very little background noise and artifacts. And when we got the first P25 radio in our comm center, when they were using that, I turned around and looked to see who walked in the room to start talking to me, because you didn't hear that noise that's in the background of a radio signal to know it's a radio signal. So good or bad, it's different, and it's very disconcerting sometimes until you get used to it.
That's for sure.
Let's see here. Mike, his Pro 94 is broken, and yeah, and the Pro 94 I probably isn't worth the money to fix. So for $100, you can get a scanner that does just about everything Pro 94 does these days. So we have a rail fan who wants to know the difference between the Spectrum Force wideband and an Austin Spectra mobile antenna, besides $100 or so.
Well, the Spectrum Force mobile antenna is a smaller antenna. It's 17 inches in height. The Austin Spectra is a much larger antenna. So if you have a high-profile vehicle, keep in mind you're going to be hitting things, drive-through, overhangs, and so on. It's a phenomenal antenna. Works really well on pretty much all the bands, VHF, UHF, 800, 900. It works really well back in the day for those of you that remember low band, because it has the tall whip. It's a large antenna. Works really well on low band. So depending on where you are, if there's a lot of 800 or 800 megahertz stuff going on, the Spectrum Force wideband antenna is definitely a good one to go with. If you're monitoring a lot of railroads, the Austin Spectra is a good antenna to go with. But if you're just, it's public safety for the most part, the Spectrum Force antenna would probably suit the bill for now. But if you're able to afford the extra $100, then
and the difference also is the Spectrum Force has got a mag mount built into it, and it's got 12 feet of coax permanently attached to the antenna. The Spectra, which is made by Austin, the same people who make the my favorite portable antenna, the Condor. The Spectra is an NMO mount, so you have to have some sort of an NMO mount on your vehicle, and typically that's done by drilling a hole or using a trunk clip mount or the big mag mount. And again, you're going to spend $100 or so for the Spectra antenna and $20 for the Spectrum Force.
Yeah, the Austin Spectra is 33 inches in height, just to give you an example. So going from 17 inches to 33 inches. So it's quite a large antenna. I've used that mobily. It works great. It was phenomenal on low band. I mean, you got crazy distance.
It worked great. Last time I went to California, on the desert, California, I had a Spectra antenna on the top of my truck, and it worked great on the highway patrol out there.
Yeah, so definitely, it's all about what you're listening to and what antenna will do the best job for that. Yeah,
absolutely. Question comes up at the half hour. FirstNet, is that a threat to us? FirstNet is first and foremost, it's a data system. It's kind of a cellular data system for public safety agencies. There is a secondary there's a secondary use of it for two-way radio. It's basically there is a push-to-talk functionality in FirstNet that you can do push-to-talk over FirstNet, but most of the FirstNet radios that are coming out are combined two-way radios that work on digital trunking systems and FirstNet data built into one unit. There's an APX series radio that does that now, and I'm sure other manufacturers are doing the same thing. So basically, it's taking an iPhone or a cell phone with data and telephone and picture capabilities and blending it with a two-way radio to get the best functionality out of both. So until they put push-to-talk over the FirstNet system, you still be able to hear it over the radio if they're not encrypted. If they do put the push-to-talk over the FirstNet network, which is basically an overlay to the cellular network, then once they do that, then you would no longer be able to hear the the voice traffic. But at this point, it's just kind of a separate unit in the same radio.
Yeah, so I mean, hopefully it's a long, long ways off before they get that technology. And as Rich said, it's more data than anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we're good, my friend.
All right, so let's wrap up the show right now. So what we'll do is we will go into a couple of slides here. So this evening we were watching an overview on public safety radio systems for 2021. Next week's show, we're going to be covering analog scanners in 2021. What does it all mean? And that'll be Wednesday, March the 24th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific. And then don't forget about the Scanner Guys store, where you can purchase your official hat, t-shirt, or coffee mug, thescannerguyshow.com. Train Aficionado Live is coming at you the first Monday of the month. That's Monday, April the 5th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific. That is on the Train Aficionado YouTube channel. If you're into trains or a rail fan, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. And then certainly check out the blog as well at trainaficionado.com. And follow, like, and subscribe to the Scanner Guys as well. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram at the Scanner Guys. Check out our brand new website, thescannerguyshow.com. And we want to just remind you, our friend over at the Scanner School, Phil, is doing another one of these great webinars. So let me just pop that back up on the screen here. Phil is hosting another webinar about SDRs, and that'll be Tuesday, March the 23rd, the night before our show at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. You can sign up, save your seat at their website. Go to scannerschool.com/webinar. And the replay will be available at that same link. And you can sign up for some of his free courses. You can go to the website, courses.scannerschool.com. Should be a good time, so definitely check that out as well. So some good stuff going on over at the Scanner School with Phil. So definitely join him for that event next week. We thank you so much for joining us each and every week. We hope that you join us again next week. If you made it this far on the broadcast, congratulations. And make sure you hit that subscribe button. That helps us out tremendously.
Absolutely. The more subscribers we get, the better. We are over 2,000 already, and hopefully we'll hit the big 10K milestone.
Oh, that would be great by the end of the year. Let's try to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I think that's about it. I know we missed some of the comments. We were kind of scrolling through them. I'm trying to copy them down as we go. So if we missed your comment, we apologize. We are reading every single comment, but obviously we can't mention everyone on the radio, but or on the radio on the show. But we are doing our best.
Yeah, so definitely, if you have a question that you looking for an answer that you didn't get the full answer tonight, email support@scannermaster.com or give a call to Scannermaster as well. They're open Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Time at 1-800-722-6637. Also spells 1-800-SCANNER.
Wow. I never realized that. How did they do that?
Yeah, we did it. And that's going to wrap it up for now. I'm Jonathan Higgins.
I'm Rich Carlson.
We'll see you again next week. Have a great night.
Later.
Bye-bye.